The haunted mansion. The old abandoned mansion had always been a source of fascination for the kids in the neighborhood. They would dare each other to go up to the front door and touch it, but no one had ever been brave enough to go inside. One night, a group of teenagers decided to break into the mansion and spend the night. They thought it would be a thrill, a chance to prove how brave they were. As they explored the dusty old rooms, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They laughed it off and tried to enjoy themselves, but the atmosphere was tense. As the night went on, strange things started happening. Doors would open and close on their own, and they would hear whispers coming from the shadows. They tried to leave, but the front door was stuck, no matter how hard they pulled. They were trapped in the mansion, and they knew they weren't alone. They could feel a presence in the room with them, watching and waiting. They huddled together, too scared to move, until dawn finally broke and they were able to escape. They never spoke of that night again, but they all knew that the mansion was more than just an old, abandoned house. It was a portal to something dark and malevolent, and they were lucky to have survived. The Storm Watcher. It was a dark and stormy night, and Alice was home alone, curled up on the couch with a good book. She had always been a bit nervous about storms, but tonight, she felt especially uneasy. As she read, she thought she heard a noise coming from upstairs. She told herself it was just the wind, but the sound came again, louder this time. Alice's heart raced as she listened, trying to decipher the noise. Suddenly, the door to the room burst open, and Alice let out a scream. A figure stood in the doorway, its features twisted and grotesque. Alice tried to run, but she was frozen with fear. The figure began to move towards her, its arms outstretched. Alice closed her eyes, bracing for the worst. But when she opened them again, the figure was gone. She was alone in the room, the storm raging outside. Alice never knew what had happened that night, but she never forgot the terror she had felt. She always made sure to lock all the doors and windows before going to bed, just in case. The Storm Watcher. It was a dark, the cabin. Once there was a young woman named Sarah who lived alone in a small, isolated cabin deep in the woods. It was a peaceful life, but Sarah often felt like she was being watched. She would catch glimpses of shadows moving out of the corner of her eye, and she would hear strange noises at night. One evening, Sarah was out for a walk when she saw a figure standing in the distance, half hidden by the trees. She froze, not sure if she should run or try to get a closer look. As she stood there, the figure started to move towards her, its movements jerky and unnatural. Sarah turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the figure crashing through the underbrush behind her, getting closer and closer. She burst through the door of her cabin and locked it behind her, panting and shaking. For the next few days, Sarah stayed inside, too scared to go outside. She could hear the figure pacing back and forth outside the cabin, its footsteps heavy and menacing. She didn't know what it wanted, but she knew that she had to find a way to escape. One night, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She gathered all of her courage and slipped out the back door, running as fast as she could through the woods. She ran and ran until she reached the highway, where she finally collapsed, sobbing and covered in scratches and bruises. When the police found her, Sarah was barely able to speak. She told them about the figure in the woods, and they searched the area, but they found nothing. Sarah was never able to return to her cabin in the woods, and she always wondered if the figure was still out there, waiting for her to return. The House on the Hill. There was a house on a hill that was rumored to be haunted. No one had lived there for years, and the locals whispered that strange things happened when the moon was full. Despite the warnings, a young couple, Samantha and Jake, decided to buy the house and fix it up. They didn't believe in ghosts, and they were determined to prove everyone wrong. At first, everything seemed fine. But as the weeks went by, strange things started happening. Doors would slam shut on their own, and they would hear footsteps when no one was there. Samantha would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like she was being watched. One night, Jake woke up to find Samantha standing at the foot of the bed, her eyes blank and empty. He tried to shake her awake, but she didn't respond. He called out to her, but she just stood there, staring at him. Jake knew he had to get out of the house. He grabbed Samantha's hand and pulled her along with him as he ran out into the night. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of town, and they never looked back.
The Ghost in the Mirror. Samantha had always been a skeptic, convinced that ghosts were just a figment of overactive imaginations. But that all changed the day she moved into the old Victorian house on the edge of town. She had barely unpacked her boxes before she started noticing strange things happening. She would see movement out of the corner of her eye, and she would hear footsteps when no one was there. But the strangest thing was the ghost she saw in the mirror. It was just a brief glimpse, a pale face with dark, empty eyes. She tried to brush it off as a trick of the light, but the more she saw it, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her. Samantha tried to leave the house, but whenever she tried to pack her bags, something always seemed to stop her. She was trapped, a prisoner in her own home, with the ghost of the former owner haunting her every move. She knew she had to find a way to get rid of the ghost, before it was too late. But as she delved deeper into the house's dark past, she realized that the ghost was not the only thing she had to fear. There were secrets buried in the walls of the old house, secrets that would do anything to stay hidden.